Federalist 66, Part 2, and I'm going to start with paragraph 4. A second objection to the Senate as a court of impeachments is that it contributes to an undue accumulation of power in that body, tending to give to the government a countenance too aristocratic. The Senate, it is observed, is to have concurrent authority with the executive in the formation of treaties and in the appointment to offices. If, say the objectors, to these prerogatives is added that of determining in all cases of impeachment, it will give a decided predominancy to senatorial influence. To an objection so little precise in itself, it is not easy to find a very precise answer. Where is the measure or criterion to which we can appeal for estimating what will give the Senate too much, too little, or barely the proper degree of influence? Will it not be more safe, as well as more simple, to dismiss such vague and uncertain calculations, to examine each power by itself, and to decide on general principles where it may be deposited with most advantage and least inconvenience? So here he's addressing their criticism that the Senate might become too powerful, too aristocratic. If we take this course, it will lead to a more intelligible, if not to a more certain result. The disposition of the power of making treaties, which has obtained in the plan of the convention, will then, if I mistake not, appear to be fully justified by the considerations stated in a former number, in a former Federalist paper, and by others which will occur under the next head of our inquiries. And in the future papers, we'll talk some more about the presidential powers and responsibilities of the president. The expediency of the junction of the Senate with the executive in the power of appointing to offices will, I trust, be placed in a light not less satisfactory in the disquisitions under the same head. So when we get to papers where we'll talk about the president, the presidency, and executive branch, we'll explain more why we've given the power of appointing ambassadors, members of the cabinet, to appointing by the president, however, with the consent and advice of the Senate. So he says we'll talk about these more. And I flatter myself the observations in my last paper must have gone no inconsiderable way towards proving that it was not easy, if practicable, to find a more fit receptacle for the power of determining impeachments than that which has been chosen. If this be truly the case, the hypothetical danger of the too great weight of the Senate ought to be discarded from our reasoning. And he says, well, in the last paper, Federalist 65, I already told you that we ourselves accept that this is not a perfect document, because if we want to wait till a perfect document appears, then we'll have to wait until anarchy is everywhere, because it's not going to happen. You're not going to have a perfect document. So he says this was the best we could do with the choices we had, uniting 13 different states with different cultures, different interests, different economic interests, different cultural histories. So he says, think of that. The next paragraph, but this hypothesis, such as it is already been refuted in the remarks applied to the duration in office prescribed for the senators, it was by them shown as well on the credit of historical examples as from the reason of the thing that the most popular branch of every government, partaking of the republican genius by being generally the favorite of the people, will be as generally a full match, if not an overmatch, for every other member of the government. So he says the House of Representatives, which is directly elected by you, is going to be so powerful that if the Senate wants to overreach, the House will be an overmatch, will definitely be able to defend the rights of the people. And again, he's referring to the fact that this is not like the British aristocracy. We haven't given you a aristocratic system. And if you remember in the earlier Federalist Papers, he said one of the things we've done in this Constitution, we said nobody's going to get titles of aristocracy. We've already done away with that. The next paragraph, but independent of this most active and operative principle, to secure the equilibrium of the National House of Representatives, the plan of convention has provided in its favor several important counterpoises to the additional authorities to be conferred upon the Senate. So here are some of the other things, other authorities and powers we've given to the House to be able to overmatch the Senate if the Senate gets out of hand. The exclusive privilege of originating money bills will belong to the House of Representatives. So this is extremely important, this power of originating money bills. The same House will possess the sole right of instituting impeachments. So if there's going to be an impeachment, the House has to recommend it first. Is not this a complete counterbalance to that of determining them? The same House will be the umpire in all elections of the President which do not unite the suffrages of a majority of the whole number of electors. Here's another thing. When you get to the 1800, where Thomas Jefferson is elected, because there was a tie in the Electoral College, the decision went to the House of Representatives. That's what happens. He says, here's another big check. One of the most important, if not the most important single office of the country. If there's a tie, it's the House that elects the next president. So he says there's another point that you can look at and see how powerful the House is. The House whose members are directly elected by you. A case which it cannot be doubted will sometimes, if not frequently, happen. It says it will happen. The constant possibility of the thing must be a fruitful source of influence to that body. The more it is contemplated, the more important will appear this ultimate, though contingent power of deciding the competitions of the most illustrious citizens of the Union for the first office in it. See, he even says the first office, the office of president. It would not perhaps be rash to predict that as a mean of influence it will be found to outweigh all the peculiar attributes of the Senate. So any way you look at it, you see the House is extremely important, has so much authority, so it'll be an overmatch. It'll stop the Senate from doing anything it's not supposed to. The next part, which says a third objection to the Senate as a court of impeachments is drawn from the agency they are to have in the appointments to office. It is imagined that they would be too indulgent judges of the conduct of men in whose official creation they had participated. The principle of this objection would condemn a practice who is to be seen in all the state governments, if not in all the governments with which we are acquainted. I mean that of rendering those who hold office during pleasure dependent on the pleasure of those who appoint them. With equal plausibility might it be alleged in this case that the favoritism of the latter would always be an asylum for the misbehavior of the former. But that practice, in contradiction to this principle, proceeds upon the presumption that the responsibility of those who appoint for the fitness and competency of the persons on whom they bestow their choice and the interest they have in respectable and prosperous administration of affairs will inspire a sufficient disposition to dismiss from a share in it all such who by their conduct may have proved themselves unworthy of the confidence reposed in them. Though facts may not always correspond with this presumption, yet if it be in the main just, it must destroy the supposition that the Senate, who will merely sanction the choice of the executive, should feel a bias towards the objects of that choice strong enough to blind them to the evidences of guilt so extraordinary as to have induced the representatives of the nation to become its accusers. So he says one of the other crazy criticisms of us, of the Constitution, it says, well, if the members of the Senate are going to have to give their consent and advice to appointees by the president, now if these appointees, once they're in office, if they've got a yes vote from the Senate and they get into office and they're found to have done something criminal and they're come up with impeachment, well, these senators might just say, well, we are the people that okayed this person, so we're not going to say we were wrong, we were not wise, and we are not going to impeach him. So he says this is a wrong way of looking at it. These senators are going to be virtuous enough that when somebody who's committed a crime or has done something to harm the country, when they come in front of them, the Senate will put aside all that bias and see what's best for the country and find the person guilty if that person is guilty.